Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at The 40 Rules of Love by Elif Shafak. It's a book that really kind of blew me away. It's got these two parallel stories, right? So there's Ella, this modern-day housewife living in Northampton, and then way back in the 13th century, you've got Rumi, the famous poet, living in Konya. And their lives, even though they're centuries apart, are totally intertwined.
It's wild how Shafak pulls that off. And you know what really struck me? How she uses the story to sneak in all this information about Sufism.
Yeah, I was going to say, Sufism plays a big part in the book, right?
Totally. It's eat, pray, love, but with way more depth, a deep dive into Sufism.
And the way the story jumps back and forth between Ella's world and Rumi's world, it's so clever. It's each chapter you see these echoes between their lives, these timeless themes of love, spirituality, searching for meaning, all that stuff.
Absolutely. So Ella, she's got this seemingly perfect life, right? Yeah. The house, the family, everything.
The whole 9 yards, huh?
But she's miserable. The marriage is a drag. Her days are all the same. And she just feels like something's missing.
Yeah, she's just going through the motions.
Exactly. And then she gets this assignment to read a manuscript. It's called Sweet Blasphemy.
Ooh, intriguing title.
Right. And that's where we get transported back to 13th century Konya. This is where we meet Rumi before he was the Rumi everyone knows. He's a respected scholar, but not the famous poet yet. He's kind of coasting through life.
Living the comfortable life.
Until he runs into this wandering dervish named Shams of Tabriz. And let me tell you, Shams is a total game changer.
Shams, he's the wild card.
Oh, yeah. He's totally unconventional, questions everything, challenges social norms, a real disruptor. And his impact on Rumi, profound.
Like a spiritual earthquake.
Exactly. And he introduces Rumi to these 40 rules of love. They're more like guidelines, really. Yeah. Principles for a life guided by, love, compassion, all that good stuff.
I gotta be honest. I'm not a big fan of rules in general, but these 40 rules of love, there's something else, aren't they? They're not don't do this or you have to do that. It's more like
invitations.
Yes, invitations to look at life, at love in a whole new way. There's one that really stayed with me. It's the path to the truth is the labor of the heart, not of the head.
That's a good one. It really gets you thinking, beyond just the intellectual stuff. And that's exactly the shift Rumi goes through with Shams's guidance. He starts seeing the world through this lens of love, and man, it changes everything for him.
Like a total rebirth. And it's interesting because we see something similar happening with Ella, right?
Totally. Reading that manuscript, Sweet Blasphemy, it's like this catalyst for her own transformation. She starts questioning her choices, yearning for that kind of depth she sees in Rumi's story.
Like she's waking up from a dream.
And she starts emailing with the author of the manuscript, Aziz Zahara. And these emails, they turn into these deep, vulnerable conversations. She shares her doubts, her longing for something more. And Aziz, he gets it. He gets Sufism.
So on one hand, you've got Ella searching for meaning in modern-day Northampton, and then centuries earlier, you've got Rumi having this total spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
And it's all connected by this manuscript. It's pretty brilliant.
It is. Shafak's weaving these two seemingly separate lives together and showing us how these human experiences, they transcend time, you know?
They're universal.
Exactly. So we've met Rumi, we've kind of met Shams, but who is this mysterious Shams? And what is it about him that ignites such a dramatic change in Rumi?
Shams is, he's kind of hard to pin down. He's a wandering dervish, so no possessions, dedicated to a spiritual life, but he's not some super serious monk type figure.
Not exactly the stereotypical image of a dervish. Right. He's got this vibrancy about him. He's witty. He's insightful. He's just full of life. But he also really pushes people's buttons, challenges their beliefs, ignores social conventions.
Yeah, you said he was a disruptor before. It sounds like the kind of person who comes into your life and flips everything upside down.
Yeah.
Makes you question all your assumptions.
Exactly. And for Rumi, who's been living this very ordered life, as a scholar, Shams is like a tornado hitting Konya. He just throws these deep questions at Rumi, forces him to look beyond the intellectual stuff and really grapple with, the spiritual core of things.
Makes me think of those 40 rules of love we were talking about. How do those fit into this whole transformation?
Oh, yeah. Those rules are like guideposts along the way. Shams uses them to kind of steer Rumi towards a deeper understanding of love. And I don't mean just romantic love, but love as this universal force, like a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's not about finding your soulmate or whatever.
Yeah. It's it's bigger than that. It's about opening yourself up to this expansive kind of love that transcends the ego, the self, and connects you to something truly divine.
I guess, yeah, that would be pretty mind-blowing. It's like shifting your whole worldview.
Right.
Seeing the world through the lens of love instead of, fear or judgment.
Exactly. And this change, it doesn't happen overnight for Rumi. He goes back and forth, He doubts Shams, he doubts himself. There's definitely some resistance there.
Sounds like an internal battle. Like when you know you need to change, but there's a part of you that's like clinging to the familiar.
Oh, absolutely. And this internal struggle, it kind of plays out in the external world too, right? Rumi's family, his community, they don't know what to make of Shams. They see him as a threat, like he's leading Rumi down the wrong path.
It's funny how that happens. Whenever someone challenges the status quo, there's always pushback. People get scared of change.
Totally. And this fear, it really comes through in Rumi's eldest son, Aladdin. He's super suspicious of Shams. He sees him as a rival for his father's attention, like a danger to the family's reputation.
So you've got this tension between tradition and change.
Yeah.
The old guard versus the new ideas. Sounds like a recipe for conflict.
And it is. All these rumors start swirling around Shams, people accusing him of heresy, even linking him to this dangerous group called the Assassins.
Oh, now it's getting serious. It's like this dark undercurrent running through the story now.
Yeah, there's this real sense of danger. And Rumi, he's caught right in the middle of it. His connection to Shams starts to damage his reputation, cause problems in his family.
Oof. Talk about being between a rock and a hard place. On one hand, you have this amazing spiritual awakening, but on the other, you've got your family and your community pushing back. How does Rumi even deal with that?
Well, Rumi turns to what he knows, what he's good at, poetry. His poems become this outlet for everything he's going through, his doubts, his struggles, his growing understanding of love, of the divine.
So his poetry is like a bridge between his inner world and the outer world.
Yeah. Exactly. It's how he expresses what he can't put into words. And while all of this is going on, there's another character we meet, Kimya.
Oh, yeah, Kimya. She's one of Rumi's students, right? And she falls hard for Shams.
She does. It's kind of heartbreaking, because she mistakes this deep spiritual connection for, romantic love.
I get that. It's like he is her soulmate, but not in the way she thinks. It's more of a spiritual kinship.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because she can't see that, because she's so focused on this idea of romantic love, well, it doesn't end well for her.
It's like those times when we project our own desires onto someone else, and it just leads to disappointment, maybe even heartbreak. Makes you think. How do we know when it's real, when it's more than just our own projections? What are we really searching for in our relationships?
Deep questions, man. And speaking of relationships, let's check in with Ella. What's happening in her world while all this drama's unfolding back in Konya?
So we left Ella kind of at a crossroads, trying to figure out her feelings for Aziz, questioning her marriage, trying to figure out what she wants out of life, spiritually speaking. What happens next?
Well, Ella does something pretty unexpected. She decides to, she books a flight to Boston to meet Aziz in person.
Whoa, hold on. Just like that.
Yep, pretty much. It's a huge step for her, Ella's always played it safe, and now she's jumping into the unknown.
It's like that classic movie scene where the character quits their job, dumps their partner, and hops on a plane to some exotic locale.
Exactly. She's breaking free from all those constraints, embracing the uncertainty, driven by this deep need for connection and this yearning to explore these spiritual questions that have been stirring inside her.
So she flies to Boston. What's the meeting like? Does she find what she's looking for in Aziz?
The meeting is, it's intense. There's a definite spark between them. They talk for hours, sharing stories, diving into Sufism, Rumi's teachings. But it goes beyond just the intellectual stuff. There's a real physical attraction there, too.
It's like all that pent-up energy from their emails just explodes when they finally meet face-to-face.
Exactly. But it's not all smooth sailing. They both have baggage, Past relationships, unresolved issues. Aziz is still grieving the loss of his wife. Ella's dealing with the guilt of, leaving her husband. So it's passionate but complicated.
A real emotional roller coaster. And speaking of complicated, back in Konya, things take a turn for the worse with Rumi and Shams. What happens next?
Well, all that tension we talked about, it kind of comes to a head. And then Shams just vanishes.
Wait, what? He just disappears?
Gone without a trace.
What happened? Did they ever find out what happened to him?
That's the thing. It's a mystery. Some think he was murdered, maybe by people who saw him as a threat. Others believe he chose to move on. Felt like he'd done what he needed to do with Rumi. Shafak doesn't really give us a definitive answer.
Oh, it's frustrating. But I kind of like that she leaves it open-ended. But yeah, I mean, it must have been devastating for Rumi. Shams was like his mentor, his best friend, the one who kind of set him on this whole spiritual journey.
It was a huge loss for Rumi. But you know what? Out of that grief, out of that pain comes some of his most beautiful poetry.
It's like that idea that creativity is born out of suffering. Rumi's pain becomes this wellspring of inspiration, his way to connect with the divine.
And through his poetry, he keeps Shams' memory alive. He shares those 40 rules of love with the world, spreads that message of love, compassion, and awakening.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So Shams is gone. Rumi's pouring his heart out into his poetry. What about Ella? How does she cope after her trip to Boston?
She goes back to Northampton a changed woman. She knows she can't just go back to her old life, pretend like nothing happened. Meeting Aziz has awoken something in her, a desire for authenticity, like living a life that's true to herself.
It's like she's seeing her life for what it really is now, without all the illusions. And she's got to decide, right? Try to squeeze back into her old life or build something new.
And she chooses to build something new. She separates from her husband and starts pursuing her passion for writing.
That's a brave move. It's not easy to walk away from a comfortable life, even when you know it's not right for you anymore. But she's listening to her heart right, putting those 40 rules of love into practice in her own life.
She is. And she stays in touch with Aziz. Their relationship, it evolves. It becomes less about, the romantic stuff and more about supporting each other on this spiritual path, sharing their insights, their struggles, their victories.
Like they've found a different kind of love, one that goes beyond the physical, beyond all those societal expectations.
Exactly. And through that connection, through that shared journey, both Ella and Aziz find this deeper sense of meaning, of purpose. They both embrace the power of love to transform not just romantic love, but love for yourself, love for something bigger than yourself, love for everything.
So what does it all mean? What can our listeners take away from this, especially if they're just discovering these ideas for the first time?
I think the 40 Rules of Love challenges us to think about love in a whole new light, not just as a feeling, but as this force that connects us all. It's a path to spiritual awakening, a journey of self-discovery.
It's like Shafak saying, hey, there's so much more to life than just going through the motions. There's a whole other dimension of experience waiting for you if you're open to it. And I think that's something we can all relate to, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And in a world that often feels, pretty messed up, that message is more important than ever. Maybe if we all embraced those 40 rules of love, if we all opened ourselves up to a more expansive kind of love, we could make the world a little bit brighter, a little bit more connected.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, dear listeners, we invite you to explore the 40 rules of love for yourselves. See what insights you discover on your own journey. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.